So today we're going to start chipping away at some of the little odd jobs on the Spitfire. I guess who better to do that than someone who's a bit odd? Let's get going. So once we got the steering rack bolted in and actually slipped the tie rods into the steering arms, it was obvious that this steering rack is actually a little bit wider than the one that came out. It was towed out on both sides, so I had to turn it in a few extra turns each side before I actually hooked it up and ran the nuts on there. So now it looks like we're in the ballpark for when we get it off the lift here and start setting the front end and do the toe end. And we got our little ground wire here that looks nice and tidy. So we'll go to the other side and see what we got going on over there. So one of the things the owner wanted me to do was go ahead and put a new belt on it while I was in there playing with the rack, because he figured since we're so tight right here with the electric fan that once I lifted the engine up I could get in there and change it. But we actually can't, because I can't lift the engine far enough to do that. So what I did was I just take these bolts out really easily. It gives me plenty of room to move that and get it out of there. Now this belt doesn't actually look like it has to be replaced, but it does look like it's probably 10 years old or so, probably put on when the car was originally restored. And he did buy a belt, but this belt's a lot shorter than this one. When we got this thing in here, the alternator was all the way out as far as it would go into the adjustment and didn't give you hardly any adjustment left at all to play with. So when we pull it in though, it won't spin anymore because the fan's hitting the bracket. Because apparently the bracket's on upside down. We flip that bracket over, should give us full adjustment range again, and maybe the new belt that he bought will actually fit it. We'll see. So one of the little jobs I wanted to take care of before I actually get in and start putting anything back together in the dash is I wanted to get the washer fluid bottle actually mounted so we can get the line run in through the dash. So what I did, I made up this simple little bracket right here. I just screw that onto there, and then this will screw right onto there, and it'll sit right there in a nice little spot where it won't interfere with the inner fender well here, and when the prop rod comes down it sits above it, so that's a nice little spot for it. So while I was in here figuring out the bracket and all, I realized this hose here is cracking and splitting right here by the clamp for the fuel line, and we don't want the new owner to have any kind of a unfortunate incident, so might as well replace that while we're in here. But then I started looking at it over and I don't see a fuel filter anywhere in the engine compartment. I thought, where the heck is this thing? It does have one, doesn't it? As much time, energy as the previous owner spent on all these fuel lines and bending them just so, making everything nice and straight and level and bent perfectly and nice and tidy, and brackets and clips so nothing moves from one end of the car to the other. There's got to be one in here. He wouldn't have forgot it, would he? Well, I've been from one end of this car to the other, and I can't find it. I know. Cue all the jokes from the wives. All right, we done? So now I decided we're putting a fuel filter in. So instead of just replacing this line, we're going to put in a fuel filter, boom, just like that. And being right here, there's plenty of airflow, so it's not actually going to be hot, so no worry about like melting this or anything, and it will clear the washer bracket. So it's been a few days now. We got the alternator bracket here flipped over. Now we have full range of movement just like we're supposed to have. But the belt that he had did not fit. It was way too short. So trying to get a V-belt locally is turning out to be a real problem. Everything remotely close to the size I need, I was only finding at any stores locally as lawnmower belts with the fabric coating, and we don't want one of those. And I tried to do my homework on what belt to put on it, And I took a stab at it knowing that a 71, 72 would have an alternator, but also a 70 will as well, which showed a different belt. And me not being quite as familiar with the Triumph, and especially GT6s, as I would say an MGB, MGA, or even a midget, I didn't know that 70 harmonic balancer is different than 71, 72, but is the same as 69, 68, and this being a 69 engine. I should have ordered a belt for 70, but I ordered it for 71, 72. It was even longer than what I took off. But I had a belt sitting here for a midget 1500, and I thought, let's see if that fits. And it's a little on the snug side. It's all the way to the inside of the adjustment and just goes on, but it does work. So that's what we're going to run, because I don't want to have to place another order and pay the outrageous shipping charges for just a small dollar value order to get that belt, because shipping would be more than what the belt costs. So this is going to work. There'll be no problems with it. We know what the replacement belt's supposed to be. It'll be fine. I went ahead and cleaned up all the wiring here, because the wires were just kind of draping down and just hanging down, going here to this circuit breaker and relay for the electric fans. And the wires were just plugged into the back of the alternator, which isn't that uncommon, but we were going ahead and putting the proper connector on the back of the wiring, or the back of the alternator anyway, and it had a diode here because it has an MSD box on it, and it was just plugged in with spade connectors. So what I did was I moved it down to here, so it's down inside the wiring here where the shrink wrap is, instead of up here where it could get bumped and the wire broken on it, and it wouldn't work with that anyway, and rerouted it down with the rest of the wiring harness to make it nice and cleaner. So I did get the washer bracket painted, got everything installed here, and got it all plumbed up to the washer pump, and of course the new fuel filter and fuel line in place. And I did receive the new fuse box, and the connectors are interchangeable. The one will go into the other, so why they don't actually have these available separately somewhere, I don't know. But the owner did say he thought it was an awful lot of work to unwire all this stuff and to not worry about completely changing this out. To go ahead and just take the connectors we need out of this one to replace the ones that we need to replace in here to get everything working right. And then he can just keep this in with his stash of parts for any kind of future problems. He could either use some more of these connectors or just go ahead and put the whole box in at some point if he wanted to. So just an FYI, for those who do actually have a Spitfire or a GT6 and you are trying to find the grommet to go through the fuse box because it doesn't come with it, I did find an alternative. I found something I think will work just fine. This grommet here has the same outer diameter, just a slightly tighter inside diameter, but it's stretchy enough it shouldn't be a problem. This one is listed in the catalogs for the wiper mechanism to go through the firewall of a Triumph TR3A. Now I did try to play around with some windshield adjustments, try to get everything fitting a little bit nicer. And I'm going to say that I do not recommend you trying to play with that too much if you're not that far off. Get it right the first time when you're building the car. Don't try to go back and fix it later, because you got to take way too much apart within the dash. And it's, quite frankly, too much of a pain in the butt, too much time to make it really worth it. And I wasn't able to get nearly as much adjustment as I would like to get, but it does look better. The hardtop is now square on the car, and the windshield is almost square with the hardtop, much better than it was before. And actually the right side window actually fits even a little bit better than it did before, but the left side, I'm still not happy with. Now the owner is going to be putting a soft top on this car at some point. And once the soft top's on it, that misalignment's not going to be noticeable at all. It'll be just fine. It only shows up with the hard top. So I think we are actually to that point where we're past the point of diminishing returns. The amount of time and effort we've already put into it is probably more than it was worth to get where we are. And it's definitely not worth continuing forward on this. And we all know once you've had one of these cars for a little while and you've put the hard top on in the fall and you've taken it off in the spring and put it back on in the fall and back off in the spring, that if you end up not actually using it much deep into the fall and early in the spring, you just get tired of doing that and you stop putting the hard top on altogether and you just leave the soft top on for storage. So yeah, we're done. We're not going to do any more with that. So the next things I'm going to have to do is play with moving the cables and stuff around to swap the two gauges around to the right positions. Try to get the hazards and horn turn signals all working consistently. Once all that's done, I can put all this stuff together. And right now we are at the beginning of like a 3 to 5 day stretch of really unusually nice weather for this time of year. Hopefully this will cooperate reasonably well moving forward and I can get all this stuff done and he can get it back into his garage while that nice weather is here.